everyone. Thank you for joining me on the Charmed Life podcast. I'm Tricia Carr. I have a very special guest today. She is one of the top psychic mediums in Los Angeles, as well as a writer, host, actress, model, producer, singer, and speaker. She has authored several books, including Archangels and Ascended Masters and Diary of a Ghost Whisperer. And she has a book coming fresh off the presses in time for Halloween entitled Supernatural Survival Guide. To say the least, she has impacted my life with her gifts and work, and so I'm beyond pleased to welcome Laura Powers. Hi, Laura.
Hi. So nice to connect with you like this.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. And we are actually connecting. If you're listening to this on podcast, the audio version, we're also we're doing a video version that you could find on YouTube later, or vice versa. If you're watching the video, then you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, etc. So it's really nice to see you animated.
Yes. It's always nice to have the visual as well.
Yeah, exactly. Just one more medium. We already have plenty of mediums in the room right now.
Yes.
There's you, there's me.
So true.
Audio, video. Oh gosh. Okay. Anyway, sorry, that's a bad pun. Anyway, before we, I'm really excited to discuss your newest book, and I'm glad we could get together in time for Halloween. And I want to get this podcast out before Halloween. We're just a little bit before as we're recording this. And before we start, though, I want to give you a chance to share anything about your work, past, present, or future. Anything you'd love to share, because oh my gosh, it's all so fascinating to me.
Gosh, well, ever since I was little, just always felt different, knew I was different, and saw a lot of things. I actually grew up thinking that maybe I was crazy because other people didn't respond to the things that I was seeing and sensing. I remember asking my mother when I was about 7 if she saw things, and I knew based on her answer that she didn't know what I was talking about. And I think that's something that's fairly common for people that are psychic to internalize it and question it and think maybe it's just them. So I really tried to hide it because it was scary to me. A lot of us who are psychic have had past lives where we've been persecuted for our gifts. And so it was not something that I wanted to talk about if other people weren't experiencing it. So it really wasn't until I was in college that I was affirmed that I wasn't crazy, because a family friend described a ghost that I had seen but never told anybody about. And I thought, okay, I'm not crazy, which was both at once comforting and a little scary because it meant that everything was real that I was experiencing.
I can completely relate to that because, as I said, Laura has impacted my life. She was the first person who was sort of helped to be this catalyst for me opening up to my gifts, or reopening, I should say, because, of course, I remember as a child, speaking with animals, and the imaginary friends that I had are actually my guides that are still with me today. And it's funny, there's a really weird story about how I met one of my guides. She was appearing to me as a little leprechaun, and like with gold skin. And then she developed, and she kept telling me her name was Lee or Lily or Layla or Lilia, like all these different versions. And so I just started calling her Lee. And then after I'd been journaling about that and everything, just one day on a lark prompted by something my cousin had posted on Facebook, I decided to go on Ancestry.com. I don't know, I was just curious. I know nothing about my family ancestry. I mean, like literally, I didn't know the name of my grandfather. I asked this cousin and she's like, seriously? And I was like, yeah, it came from a family that's kind of like not all bonded together in a lot of ways. Anyway, so I ended up finding through census records that my great-grandmother, just on my mother's side, just my great-grandmother, her name is Lilia or Layla. In the census records, it's all different versions, all the ones that she had been giving me.
Oh, fascinating.
Layla, Lilia, all of those names were in the different census records. And like I said, I've been communicating with her for a couple of months at least.
Yeah.
And one of my, and she informed me, she's like, do you remember your imaginary friend when you were little? And I'm like, yes, of course, there was Polish. So one of my imaginary friends. And the other one was named Little Mama. And that was her. She's my little mama. She's my grandmother, great grandmother.
That's so great.
Anyway, so childhood stuff. Yes, indeed.
No, you bring up a really good point that the things that children sense that a lot of times adults deride or say like that's not real. It's important. It's significant. And as we get older, we're taught that what we sense from the non-physical realm isn't real. And so people learn to sort of shut it down or turn it off. And that's understandable. But if we can keep that open, then it opens the door for magic and also helps us a lot in our lives.
Yeah, exactly. It's just having more information, which you talk about a lot in the book, kind of comparing the physical to the non-physical, and just being
Yeah,
educated. I mean, like you talk about, you're comparing it to the physical health, and I always talk about in my podcast and teaching spiritual hygiene and spiritual health, and it's the models that we have for health are exactly physical health are exactly like the models we have for spiritual health. And you can
right,
accidentally be physically healthy if you're not really well informed in nutrition. You can, but
right.
you have a better shot at being physically healthier if you are informed about nutrition. So, well, let's get into the book then.
Okay, great.
Let's just start if you want to tell how the Supernatural Survival Guide came to life, how it began its birth.
Yeah, so I was asked to write an article for a magazine, Devour magazine, and it was right around Halloween. So I thought, well, it'd be fun to write something Halloween theme. I love Halloween; it's my favorite holiday, to be honest.
Hmm.
And so I came with this idea that something that would be accessible and fun to everyone, whether or not you're really into this kind of stuff. I think everyone likes Halloween and likes the idea of these different supernatural creatures. So I wrote a short guide for the magazine that was a summation of a little bit about a type of supernatural creature, how to know they're around, how to protect yourself, and just kind of general tips and information. And then we did a photo shoot for the magazine as well, which was a lot of fun.
So
And
great.
I knew it was. Thank you. Yeah, it was great. It was like if you look at the cover, I'll actually hold it up so you can
Oh,
see. It's
that's
like
great. Thank you for having
like
that. So good.
as a vampire on the cover, and it was very fun outside. We went to did all these great costumes and headpieces. But I knew when I was writing it that it's like, wow, I love this topic and I want to turn this into a book. So I wrote just the article for the magazine. And then as it got closer to this Halloween, about a year later, I was like, okay, it's time to revisit this. So I started fleshing it out and turning it from just an article to a full book.
It's awesome. And it's very practical the way you have it outlined, which might seem hilarious that we're talking about,
Right.
she gives practical tips about werewolves, but she
Right.
really does. Not
Right.
to digress, but I would love for you to talk about why Halloween is your favorite time of year, what that season means to you, what this season, because that's where we are now. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I studied theater in college and I did both acting and costuming. So I love everything about the costumes and kind of putting on a different face and being somebody else for a while. I just think it's great. It's a lot of fun. And especially in our society, which is so kind of formal and proper in many ways, it's fun to just be a little wild and,
Yeah.
just play. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I love about Halloween is people are given permission to open to that side and allow it to come out instead of just holding everything in.
Mm.
And Halloween is during Scorpio, which is really as a sign about seeing the shadow, seeing what's hidden. And that's what I do for my work. So I think it makes sense that I love the holiday so much. But yes, I think it's a combination of that sort of fun, playfulness, and then accessing spirit and what's hidden that I love so much about it.
That's really great. And they say that the betwixt and between times are when the veil is thinnest. So, whether it's midnight and noon or dusk and dawn, and also the transitional seasons. And for me, spring and autumn are so transitional. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
summer and winter are like you're right in the middle of them, but spring and autumn are transitional.
Yeah.
And so it's a great time. I think in those transitional times when the veil is thinnest and everything, it's great for both introspection and manifesting. It's like just such a dynamic
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I think so much gets revealed and is cleared up. And so if you're paying attention, you can have a lot of really big realizations as well as manifest some really powerful things. So for me, those transitional times, especially around Halloween, is when I often get a lot of clarity and then also big kind of shifts in terms of what's going on in my life.
Yeah, I'm getting that right now too. And even
Yeah.
before, like all of my life that I can remember, so teenage 20s and stuff like that, I remember those being like my absolute favorite seasons. Just maybe even by the physical feeling of them, the air and the earth and how it's changing.
Yeah.
And it's very powerful, whether it's materializing in spring or dematerializing in fall. Both are the same kind of opposite sides of the same coin, a very powerful energy. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm with you. Okay, so let's see. Where do I want to start? Well, I guess I think it might be fun to start with something that's a little easier, like ghosts, or do you want to tell me how about this? What's your favorite? Can you say there's a favorite part of the book? I mean, angels, of course. She starts with angels. We have to say angels are our favorite if we want to stay safe.
I think I really enjoy, just because it's kind of out of the box compared to what I normally do as a psychic medium. I really enjoyed writing about those that are not written about as much, like vampires, werewolves, Djinn, which we call them genies in Western terminology. That was really fun for me, because I've written about some of these other creatures, dark entities and demons, and certainly angels in my other books. But this is the first time I was able to write about these other types, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, those are really, the zombie one was and the werewolves. And I was like, oh, see, I'm not very well educated on those, so I found those really fascinating. But the vampires, yes, I am pretty well educated on vampires. I read a book called The Vampire Codex that was really fun and interesting.
Yeah, Psychic Vampire Codex.
The Psychic Vampire Codex. Yeah. But what Laura's book does is it's laying out in a way that is, like I say, very practical. It tells you who they are, how you can sense them, or what are the signs that they might be around, and if need be, what you should do to protect yourself against them. And a common theme, actually I think that would be a good thing to talk about, is generally just being in love versus being in fear, and how how important that is.
Right. So whatever we feel goes out like an energy boomerang into the world and comes back to us, that we think and feel. But the feeling is really the strongest aspect of that. So if you're operating out of fear, you're going to draw things to you that have a fear energy, a fear-based energy. And if you're operating from a place of love, it's going to be the opposite. You're going to draw loving things to you. So people that are in a lot of fear or anxiety, stress, are more likely to draw dark entities, demons, fallen angels, all the not fun stuff. In particular, one of the things that I learned, which is really fascinating, is fallen angel attacks. So fallen angels are, angels that have turned dark, basically, and are not in that loving and light place like regular angels are. And they have a very toxic energy. So you are more likely to be targeted by a fallen angel if you have toxic energy in your life, if you're in toxic dynamics with people, if you're consuming toxic substances. And that was a big light bulb moment for me. Like, oh, wow, that, if this is something that's happening to me or to a client, there's probably something physical that they shift in order to protect themselves.
Exactly, because, everything begins energetically or non-physically, and then it becomes physical. But you can also, just like, you can, let's say health again is just such the perfect model, because we all know how to take care of ourselves. We're all, whether we do or we don't, we understand how our bodies work, and our bodies are just a metaphor, just the truth about absolutely everything. It's funny that we call things esoteric. I like the sound of that word, but it really means things that are like for a specific few to understand. So I don't like what it actually means, because I think that the universe has put it all right out there for us. Nothing is hidden. When we're overthinking something, that's not really the higher mind. That's not the higher source. It's really very simple. So if you are putting toxic things into your body, you're going to have toxic reactions. And, the thing that I think can help people to release fear about it, hopefully, is to realize that it is no different than, how you take care of you physically. You have to be mindful of what you're putting into your body, and you have to be mindful of how you're expressing yourself. So if you're putting in healthy food and you're exercising or moving your body, that's going to be a great way to keep yourself healthy. And so very simply, it's the same thing on the spiritual or non-physical level too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge correlation, and it's interesting because you can kind of work at it from both sides. So you can work at it from the physical side, which then impacts the energy, because everything physical has an energy, and then you can also work at it from the energy side to impact the physical. So that's how you can, get Reiki or get acupuncture treatment, which helps you physically, or you can clean up your diet and do things physically that then help on the energy level as well. Exactly.
Or like when we talk about like clearing dark entities, that's wonderful and it makes a direct effect. But if you don't change, if you ask Laura or myself to do a clearing for you, you're gonna be like, wow, this is wonderful. You should take that as inspiration to do the changes, that will raise your vibration, get you more seated in love, release fear, stress, all of that kind of stuff. Because otherwise it's just going to be, you're going to stay at that level, you're going to attract it back.
Absolutely. So one analogy I give to people is, you can go to the doctor and let's say you have like a sinus infection or something, and they can give you antibiotics and then you can have some temporary relief. But unless you change what's going on in your body, you change your overall health, then you're just going to get sick again, right?
Exactly.
It's just going to come back up. So yeah, people can hire us and we can help them get better. But what I love to do is give people advice for, okay, here's what you need to do to get yourself to a better place so that it's sustainable instead of like needing this constant healing dynamic for the same thing.
And what's really awesome about working on the non-physical or spiritual level is that everything can manifest instantaneously, as opposed to, like you're sick with a cold and you're like, okay, I'm going to take care of myself. You still have to go through the process of the physical tissues healing. There are such things as instantaneous healings. Yes, of course, that anything is possible. But on the non-physical or spiritual plane, it's instantaneous. So the thing that is not so instantaneous is the new thinking and feeling habits. So that does take some time, but it's still quicker. What's that?
You have to reprogram.
You have to reprogram your mind. And there's actually a physical effect to that too, because our thoughts and emotions create neural pathways in our brain. So, but the cool thing about that, you have a new thought, a new emotion, it'll start to create a new neural pathway. And then it's easier to be on that default that is what we say higher vibrational. What was I was thinking of another thing. Oh, I was thinking about how I had this one client who he had a dark entity attachment, and so I cleared it, and he was like instantly like, oh my gosh, that's like shocked that it just made this immediate impact.
Right.
But his question to me was like, well, what about other people? Like, they don't know about this stuff. They have no idea that this is going on. And I said, well, it just happens naturally. They either very naturally get sicker or healthier. Maybe they go home and they pick up their dog, and then they get, and then their dog loves them so much, so that raises their vibration. So then the entity will just fade away, or they go and they hate their boss, and then they attract more. Like it can happen naturally. Yeah. But again, the education of knowing what's actually going on can make a greater impact.
Yeah, and there are cases where someone can have a dark entity attachment for literally decades. I mean, it just depends on where they are. And if they're, I think of it as like an energy parasite. So if you're giving it the energy that it feeds on, it'll stick around. If you don't give it the energy it feeds on, it's going to move on and find another food source, right? It's not just going to starve on you. Yeah. There's plenty of food out there. So dark entities, they feed on energies like fear, anxiety, stress, pain, etc. And I want to bring up too, because you brought up this sort of instant healing thing, something that I found really fascinating. I write about it in the dark entity section of the book, Supernatural Survival Guide, that I had a realization that whenever dark entities were around, I would suffer allergies.
I read that part, yes.
And I thought that was so interesting because for years I had really bad allergies, and so bad that I was getting recurrent sinus infections and was, always on antibiotics. And then I cleaned up my diet and I got allergy elimination, and that helped a lot. So now when I get an allergy attack, I know that there's something around because I've healed myself internally. So it's not just a physical reaction at this point. So I've had a lot of experiences where I'll suddenly be around somebody, let's say someone walks up and sits next to me or stands next to me in line or something, and get a horrible allergy attack. And then I'll like tune in psychically and like see the entities, I'll clear the entities, and then the allergies go away. And sometimes that person is still there. Like that person may still be sitting next to me at the airport or whatever. And so to your point about instant healing, if you're really dealing at the root of whatever it is, it's possible in many cases to have like pretty instant results physically, which is awesome.
And that person is just, having a way better flight than he expected because you cleared entities from him and he didn't even
Right. Probably so. Although if they're in that same mindset, they'll just continue to attract ones, but at least I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to the point of fear and instantaneous healing and all that empowerment, I think that what might be, if this is a new topic to some people, I would love to talk about how basically it's really easy to have dominion over that non-physical realm, because it's not difficult to know where love is or what love feels like.
Right.
And it is instantaneous when you put yourself in love. And if you need help with that, like you suggest many times, you can just ask angels to help you to find where that is. And they are always willing, even if you only need to believe in them just a teeny bit, but to give them permission and a tiny bit of belief, and it will work. So to help people
because
to know.
the light is more powerful than the dark, so it only takes a little bit.
Exactly. And the light is more powerful than the dark, because creation is of light. So it's like our bodies are always moving toward wellness. So is this physical, so is the field, so is the, everything that is manifest. It's made of light. So basically any time there is something that is not of light, the field or all of manifestation works to eliminate it. Whereas the opposite isn't possibly true, because you can't have too much love of something that is made of love. It's a natural state, which is all of us, everything.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very possible to change things quickly and easily working with the angels. I love writing about the angels. They're amazing. And just to share with people a little bit about my background, I grew up being psychic and seeing things, but I like to share with people that our minds, our lives, and our energy fields are very much like a garden. If you don't plant flowers in a garden, the weeds just show up automatically. The dark shows up automatically, but flowers and, vegetables or whatever, you need to plant those and nurture them, water them, weed the yucky stuff out. And I just didn't know how to do that. Like, I literally didn't know to invite angels or light beings into my life. And as soon as I did, my life transformed like immediately. I mean, it was like a light switch went on, and then it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this new world that I'm in. So I want anyone listening to know how powerful this is, and that you can have literally miraculous, very quick, instant changes in your life as a result of working with angels and beings of light. And it's easy to get caught up in this idea that it needs to be hard. And there are sometimes hard things we need to release. A lot of the hard is about us learning what to let go of. But it doesn't need to be hard in the sense of working with the light, that it can be very fast and easy and instantaneous and magic, really.
I can attest to that, because that conversation that I had with Laura that was the catalyst for my reawakening was in December. It was December 22nd, I think it was, of 2014. So that is less than 2 years ago.
Any goosebumps. Yeah, and you've had such an amazing blossoming transformation. It's been awesome to watch you do all the things that you do.
Yes, I thank you and agree, but I'm not being immodest by accepting your compliment, because again, it's just all it is me, because I am one with y'all, just like but you just allowance. So let's see. I wanted to talk about witches and Wicca, because that was one of the things that you helped me to discover about myself. And also because in the dedication of Laura's book, The Supernatural Survival Guide, it's dedicated to witches who have, or those who have been, persecuted for witchery. Yeah, accused of it. Right, exactly. And I really loved your chapter on witches and Wicca, because, well, as I was saying, I did remember with Laura's guidance a past life where I've remembered a few since, where I was persecuted for being a witch. And I still have some, definitely the way I work now has, my husband jokingly always calls me a witch, because, and it's tongue in cheek, because we came up in sort of this very traditional religious background, both of us. And so all of the things that I do are the things that witches, in quotes, were persecuted for. So when he sees something like that happen, he goes, "Oh, you're a witch," as a joke. So tell me a little bit about witches, and also I love that you make a distinction between witches and Wicca. And Wicca is a religion and not necessarily all witches are Wiccan, and not all Wiccan are witches. Well, I think maybe all Wiccans kind of identify as with witches, right? Maybe.
I think so. I'm not an expert on it, but yeah. yeah, there are many types of witches. Yeah, I felt really compelled to write about this and to help shed some light on the topic, because I think there's been a lot of fear about witches, and also a lot of psychics that are living right now have either been witches or been persecuted as witches, and has created a lot of fear about honoring and showing our gifts publicly. Mm-hmm. Like, I always talk about how hard it was for me to have my sort of psychic coming out of the closet. Like, that was actually so hard. And it's hard. I know it's hard for you and for most people, because our society really labels so much of these unusual gifts as dark and evil. And I don't think that's the case. But because we've been persecuted in past lives, we often are very reluctant and fearful of sharing that we're different, or sharing our gifts with the world. And I think that's the dark at work. And, the beauty of the world is that we have so many people with these different amazing abilities. And the more we can honor whatever we were given by God, given by the light, then the better the world is, because we can truly be who we are and who we were meant to be here, incarnated in this life. So that's just one thing. And then in terms of witches, I think there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstandings, and witches are people. That's the first thing I want people to understand. And just like a person can be light or dark, any person, so can a witch. So there is light witchcraft and dark witchcraft. And there's many different types of witchcraft, and a Wicca is a religion, but there's, other types of witchcraft and magic out there as well.
Yeah, Wicca's actually not that old. I think maybe about a century and a half old or something like that.
Yeah, it's not that old. You're right.
And but witchcraft or something along those lines, much older. Yeah, I mean, probably, as old as we are, as old as humans are on this planet.
Yeah. And so in the book, actually, witches are one of the only human, types that I write about. So that was kind of different. And also I felt the need, because of that, to basically share the message for people to be open-minded yet discerning. So don't assume things negative, but also pay attention to whatever you're getting intuitively about people and what they're practicing, and whether it feels aligned or light to you.
Yeah, and again, that goes for any situation. If you're going for a job interview, you need to take that advice.
Yes, absolutely. It's always good.
What I think is really fascinating too are the different topics that include shapeshifting and shapeshifters. So can you talk about the different ones that are the shapeshifters?
Yeah, that is a fascinating topic. So there are many beings that are able to change their physical form. The kind that we're probably most familiar with are werewolves, and they can morph from, a human form to a wolf. And I say quotes, I put quotes when I say wolf, because it's not a true wolf. Like in a lot of movies, they depict it like an actual wolf, and it's actually, werewolves, in my experience, don't look exactly like a wolf, but they're kind of a wolfish type creature. But there are also other types. There's like werebears and werecats, and so the were types can transform from a physical form, human, to one other form usually. But then there's other types of shapeshifters that can do any form. So they could literally look like you, Tricia, or look like me, or like whoever they want. And one of those types that can do that are the Djinn. Again, they're called genies in kind of Western terminology, but they're amazing physical transformers, and they are really incredible at illusion. So many things that you might see, or people that you might see, may not be what they appear, because they may be one of these creatures.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Doreen Virtue, if you don't know her, she's a Hay House author, and definitely, I would say, probably a mentor to many of us who are in this line of work and study. But she has in her fairy course that I took her fairy course this last year, and she talks about Djinn and puts them in the sort of category of elementals. And to your experience, are they elemental? Are elemental beings? And what I mean by elemental beings are beings that are under the well, maybe we should talk about that first. we'll digress. So yeah, are they elementals? Do you think?
Well, it's a good question, because so elemental creatures, as many people are probably aware of, they are one of the elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Djinn are described as being made of smokeless fire. So they have that fire element, but to me, they are actually a different type of creature. However, there's a lot of confusion and I think crossover in terms of, I wrote about this in the book actually, where sometimes I think Djinn are confused with fairies and vice versa. And of course, are elementals. To me, they are a different type of being, but I can see why there might be some confusion about them because there's overlap, like because they're fire elementals, but then the Djinn are made of smokeless fire.
And you know what? She may actually, I think the reason now that I'm recalling, because she talks about hybrids basically. And so since they might be a hybrid of an elemental because they can be of light, and you know, all of her teachings are about light. That could be part of the reason, but I remember particularly the Djinn standing out to me in that course, and I was like, I'm just not going to pay any attention to them. I'm not really interested.
Yeah, they can be a little scary because just like many other beings, Djinn can be light or dark. Like there's some of the beings that I write about, like demon, always dark. I would never recommend like connecting with the demon, and kind of seeing what they have to say because it's always going to have a dark, purpose or motivation. But Djinn can be just like humans. They can be light or dark, or most commonly gray.
Right. Yeah.
And the same is true for fairies and elementals. But I think with Djinn, they're so powerful that when you get one that's either on the darker end of gray or dark, it can be quite intense.
Right. And by the way, so the word that we're Djinn is Dginn, right? Is that how it's pronounced? I mean, spelled.
Right.
Okay.
There are a couple of variations, but I think that's the most common one.
And of course, you can read about it in the Supernatural Survivor Guide. But if you wanted to research it on your own, that's the spelling. I thought I'd let you know. You know what I think I would love to talk about too is angels and interdimensionals, or what people might think of as extraterrestrials. But the reason I would use the word interdimensional or maybe ultra-terrestrial, as you use in the book, interdimensionals meaning that they are beings that are not Earth derived, and they can travel into our dimension. And the reason I want to bring this up is because I've heard from a couple of different teachers that perhaps we sometimes confuse, or our perception of an interdimensional of light, of high order light, can be confused for an angel and vice versa. And I've heard it from two different sources, and also at one source when you were talking about fallen angels, when you're researching this book, you were talking about it on social media. And I asked a teacher about it, and the teacher said, well, perhaps it's sometimes, interdimensionals or, other, and, they can be same. I got the same thing. And basically both of these teachers, and my conclusion was, it doesn't matter if they're of high order light or they're of dark.
Right.
It kind of doesn't matter if you know their identity very, very specifically. But have you come across any of that, or speak of interdimensionals in any kind of way?
Yeah, so just to give a general summation, so most people are used to the term extraterrestrial, which means a being that is of our plane, so the same plane that we're currently residing in, but a different planet. So an extra-dimensional being is someone who is from the same, it's hard to explain, almost like geographical place, but from a different dimension.
Yeah, exactly.
So not like over on Mars, but here on where we consider Earth, but a different dimension. It's very, complex. And then it's a similar term would be ultradimensional, meaning not from this dimension. So I think it is confusing because sometimes people will label something as an extraterrestrial, and really I would think of it as an extra-dimensional being. But ultimately, as you said, the labels don't necessarily matter as long as we're identifying the sort of crucial pieces. But I think it can be helpful to understand the differences and look at, the different traits. So I specialize in angel stuff. I've written about this in some of my other books, but I'm an incarnated angel, as are many people who do this type of healing work. It's part of what helps me be so psychic. And so I'm very connected with the angelic realm, and I understand it very well. And when I say fallen angel, I really do feel like it's an angel that's fallen and, is not light, but ultimately what matters the most is the vibration and the energy of that being, and if they're light or dark, and what energy they bring into your life. But I found it very helpful to sort of categorize and look at fallen angels, for example, and see, okay, what are the sort of symptoms of when they're around and how to identify it, because it was really fascinating what showed up.
Yeah, I completely agree. Oops, sorry. I just almost knocked something over. And I think that it doesn't matter is true when you are, say, working from a place of, I don't mean this word to be pejorative, but more ignorance, because like you say, the vibration is what's more important. But if you do become educated, which I have subsequent to these questions that I was asking about it, and because I have the intention to only work with the light, and so since I learned more about each, I actually, you can ask, if it's a being of light, you can ask what their makeup is, and they will let you know. And if you have, if you aren't familiar with, say, a high order light being that is ultra dimensional, extra dimensional, interdimensional, or anything like that, if you aren't aware of that possibility, but you are aware of angels, then they're fine if you think if they're an angel. You know what I mean? Like, they don't care. That's fine. But since I have more education, and I have actually been connecting with high order light beings that are extra dimensional, and they identify themselves as such if I ask. And also, to me, now that I know, I can feel the different texture of the vibration, than as compared to angels or guides or ascended masters or something along those lines.
Yeah, one of the reasons I advocate working with angels specifically is because they are trustworthy, and you know what you're dealing with. I have certainly connected with some psychics who claim to be channeling light guides, and then when I kind of tuned in, I was like, oh, those are not so light. So important to check in and remember that dark beings are often masters of illusion, and just because someone says that they're light doesn't mean they actually are. So this is where the gift of clairsentience or empathy, where you feel the energy, is really important, because if you just believe whatever a being says to you, they may or may not be coming from a place of light and truth, because that's what I think light really is truth. That's what I think about, is the truth, and the dark is deception. So checking in and feeling the energy from the being, is this being really coming from a light place or not? If they're not an angel, there are many other light beings, but just make sure you check in and make sure.
That's right. And people that, you read accounts or hear accounts of people who, didn't really believe in angels. And I was just listening to one yesterday, this woman who's a professional intuitive, and she hadn't really believed in angels before. She just thought it was a, cute little story. But she opened herself up to it in this one angel class, and, had just a little bit of belief in it, or at least just openness about it, and was overwhelmed when she actually thinks she met Archangel Gabriel. I like to say Gabriel, but she saw Gabriel as a man that day, so or a male energy. Anyway, she, people when they have their first encounter with angels, it's overwhelming love. There's no fear, there's absolutely no fear. So if you have any fear, that could mean either you are in that vibration, so you shouldn't be reaching out right now to that realm, or vice versa, you're picking up the vibration of whatever you're encountering on the non-physical planes.
Yeah, angels are only going to share with you pure light and love. And it's funny, right when we were starting this recording and we did our invocation, like we both of us do, and Jesus stepped forward. And if I share a story about him, which is, I was raised within the Catholic religion, but not as a Catholic, meaning my mother was Catholic, but she wanted me and my sister to choose for ourselves. So we were raised within it, but not made to choose that we had to be Catholic. Yes. And I always had really mixed feelings, and there were a lot of things in Catholicism that I struggled with. There's a lot of guilt and kind of focusing on sin and kind of what I feel like are dark things and pain. And so I kind of, as an adult, was like, I don't like that, and I kind of was like, no, Jesus.
Yeah.
And as an adult, after I'd started this process of psychically opening up, and I'd already had some angel experiences, and Jesus totally showed up for me, and I was like, wow, you're amazing. And all I felt was like this pure love. And it's the same thing with angels. So if you're connecting with the being where you feel judgment or fear or anything that doesn't feel good, that's probably not a good being to connect with,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not the light.
I have a very similar experience. I sort of raised myself in fundamental Christianity. I say that because I was such a dork. I took myself to church and stuff like that, and really got in that yeah. But I was
Right. No, I did the same. I asked to go to a different church when I was in middle school, just out of curiosity.
yeah. And I think that it's we were spiritual seekers then, and I had a lot of spiritual development at that time, but there was a wall for me. And then that wall also consisted of fear and judgment and rules and things that just broke my heart, And so I did the same thing. I didn't know otherwise, so I threw Jesus out with the bathwater.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And then when I started to open up again, and then I realized I'm pretty sure I can invite Jesus back in. And it actually took some time. It was like he hung back because I needed to be able to heal those wounds that were derived from the religion and the people and the ego before he stepped back in. And now he's my primary ascended master guide. And anytime I'm doing shadow work, he shows up and he helps me and holds me. And he's a very good example for operating with dominion in this dimension, over the darkness, over any kind of, he just had no problem just being like, he really is a great example, when he was here, physically incarnated, of knowing that you can just operate from light, and then that's where all the power is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people kind of forget, or maybe don't know, that that's one of the things he did. He literally did clear demons, just like you and I do. This is one of his strengths and abilities, so he makes a great guide for this. And to the point about, you were talking earlier about the physical and how strong we are. One point I want to make is, we, being physically incarnated beings, are inherently more powerful than almost any energy being that we're going to come across, because as a physical being, we are physical and we are energy.
Yes.
So basically we have what they have, and we have the physical, which they don't have, most of them. And so it's incredibly empowering when you remember, because most of what gives them power is fear. Mm-hmm. Like, when we're afraid of them. And when we're really in our power and we understand the power that we have, that fear can be released, and then we truly are so much more powerful than they are.
That's so true. I was just writing an article, and I was just talking about how, my cat and I both saw, it was kind of an elemental in the house at the same time. And so that's what the article is about, my cat being psychic. But, the last and we see the same thing. And my husband's like, I don't see it. He's like looking the same direction. He sees us both like sharply turn our head, like, oh, and he's like, no, I don't see it.
I love that.
Yeah. But anyway, the last paragraph is about, addressing that. You're probably wondering, do I see things that aren't just dancing, prancing fairies? Sure, but it doesn't concern me, because I just stand in the knowing that they must leave, because the real threats come with bodies. If it's a ghost, that's just a person without a body, and I excuse them from my home because they weren't invited, just like I would a person walking in my front door. But that's way scarier, because now I have to physically remove them.
Yeah, it's so funny, because a couple of months ago, I was dealing with, and I was in the middle of finishing up the Supernatural Survival Guide, and I had been writing a lot about fallen angels and Djinn, which were what were showing up for me and my clients, and I was figuring out how to clear them, and just, the specifics for each type. And I psychically asked, gosh, what's next? Because as I've gone through my psychic process, I've gone through levels of initiation, and I think this is common for most people, that you are sent something that you're ready to deal with. So basically, it's kind of like a video game. As you level up, the bad guys get bigger too. But the rewards do also. But basically, you're not going to be in a level 1 and get a level 10 baddie at your way, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I think that's helpful, that whatever is being sent to you, it means that you are capable of it. That's just how the universe works. But so anyway, I was at this point where I'm like, I've been dealing with fallen angels and Djinn and clearing them for clients. And I was like, what's next? And then I totally heard humans, and I was like, oh my God.
Shoot.
Because yeah, but just in a way, just to help everyone be less afraid, because yes, humans are something to, really consider as very powerful.
Yeah.
And just the fact that you're here in this human form means you are a very powerful being.
Yeah. Well, let's work on some of those political candidates that are those poisonous, toxic attachments in the form of political candidates. No, I'm sorry. I'm kidding. I don't mean to cast any judgment. But hey, there's a lot. If you listen to politics, which you shouldn't, by the way, everyone, I say this almost every single time that I do a podcast, do not listen to the news. The news is not helping you. The news doesn't make you an informed citizen. The news is is just a sales organization trying to create fear. Get off of it. Okay. You'll be an informed citizen if you just stop watching the news, because angels or NPR will gently bring you what you need to know.
It's funny about politics in general. I don't want to go into politics specifically, but
never do
share story is funny, which is that growing up, I was actually very interested in politics. And if you've read any of my books, I write about this a little bit, but my master's degree is in political science. And I was an appointed official. I ran for office.
Wow, I didn't know that part.
Yeah. No, I was really in it. I was a delegate for the state assembly and convention in '08. So, I mean, I was like really involved. But what's interesting is that was when I was very psychically shut down. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I psychically opened back up, it was crazy. It was like my interest for politics just dropped away. Mm-hmm. And the message I got was that it was not an effective tool for me. Like, basically, I'm a lot more effective in terms of my work doing the work that I do now in the spiritual realm, which I think is really fascinating. Because it's funny, I'll run into people from my old life. I worked at the president's office of the University of Colorado. Again, I was an appointed official. I was a planning commissioner. I was chair of the public art committee in my community. And I'll run into people from that old life, and they're like, "What are you doing? What are you up to?" I'm like, "I'm a psychic." And it's just like a total, such a 180 that I think a lot of people don't even know how to respond.
Right. Well, I had this really remarkable, because I'm in the process of, doing, being a writer and a healer exclusively. And I say I'm in the process of it because, there's transition. And I actually asked for a very smooth, gentle transition. That was something I really wanted. But smooth and gentle also means time. And you're still dealing with, as opposed to when some people have an awakening, they have the rug pulled out from under them,
Oh, yeah.
And that's fine. That I just asked for that not to be. So it just takes longer. And I'm so grateful. And it's so funny. It's the reason it's also more gentle and slow for me is because what I'm coming from, it was very rewarding, and I didn't have any complaints about it before. But now it's just like going from joy to joy, Yeah. But the reason I bring this up is because just, it was 2 days ago, my closest friend and colleague in the other industry, and we've been friends for 10, 12 years, I can't remember. And we've worked together through many different, we keep working together. Like I'll move to one job and he'll come after me. It's really interesting. It's been that way for like 10 years. He texted me out of the blue. By the way, he's an empath, and he is just, I've told him that, and he's kind of like, yeah, huh. He's kind of opening up to it. But he had this moment where he was like, he was meditating, even though he didn't use that word, but he's like, I just had all this clarity. And then I just had this intuitive knowing that I needed to call you and tell you that if you're pulling away, that you need to do it, and that if you don't do it, you're being wasted. And I was floored.
Yeah.
And he was just like, he went on, and we haven't talked about this at all, even though we're close friends that way. So pretty amazing. And it was really beautiful because it helped me to make it. It was a way for what I've been asking for to materialize the conversation. So it was really awesome and beautiful. So just to go to prove that if you're making changes, you can just keep asking for support from your angels, and they will bring things to life for you.
Yeah, and I think it's when we don't listen and when we're not asking that things are rough. So in my case, when I was involved in politics and doing all that, I was very psychically shut down. And it's because I had some experiences that were scary to me. And I didn't at that point have teachers in my life. I didn't know how to handle it. So I did what I knew how to do, which was to shut it out or try to shut it out. Mm-hmm. And so in that process, I shut down my intuition and my psychic abilities as well. But of course, that was all just trying to share with me information. So I shut out the information I needed to know.
Yeah.
And then I had kind of a bumpy ride
Yeah.
when I was like, because it's like before I had my angelic experience and I opened up, I was literally sick. Like I was on sleeping pills. I had several medical diagnoses. I was diagnosed as depressed, polycystic ovary syndrome. Again, I couldn't sleep. I was a mess, and the fact that I got to that point was because I wasn't listening, I wasn't paying attention, and I wasn't reaching out in a helpful way. Like I was reaching out to people that were dealing with this from a purely physical perspective. Like a lot of doctors, they're using the physical tools that they have, but that wasn't the main thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like a spiritual crisis that I was in. And so that's part of why I'm so passionate about teaching and sharing information, because I just didn't, before I got to that point, I just didn't know, and I'm like, okay, I want everyone to know what's possible and that you don't have to suffer and you don't have to go through a big crisis like I did in order to make positive change.
And we are entering, and I think this, all the work that you do, including the Supernatural Survival Guide, is so relevant because we are entering an age of intuition. We've been in the age of information, and now, millennials, and there are, in the millennials, who we call millennials, there are so many star seeds, indigos, rainbows, crystals. We are, with the information really did push us to that, to this age, because information is the opposite of what being hidden, like we started with in the beginning, coming out from. And I think that, like the internet, with being able to contact someone instantaneously, is just us reminding ourselves that of the non-physical and of our abilities, that, telepathy is real. And so we just kind of like, it's like a little gateway where we can send an email, or have a Skype conversation,
Right. Yeah. No, we're going into a time where this sort of thing is accepted so much more. And I love that. And I think it's just the energies are shifting. And I actually love certain aspects of what TV has done. Like I agree with news, like you have to be careful with news, but I love that TV shows and movies have helped people open up to some of these things. Like, shows like Medium or Ghost Whisperer. I mean, this has created a whole generation of people that is familiar with this idea. Well, that wasn't there when you or I were growing up. I mean, it was a totally different time. So it's a lot more accepted and just known than it used to be. And that allows for people to feel, I think, like they can be in that, more comfortably.
I agree. Yeah. Wow, this has been so much fun. Is there anything else you'd like to share about the book or anything else that you're doing before we go?
Well, first of all, I think to operate from a place of love and fear. And it's funny because some people are like, oh, I don't even like to know about that stuff because that feels dark. And I feel like it's important to be informed and to understand what's out there. And knowledge is not the same thing as being dark, Yeah. So like now, there is a level, so be cautious of, I would say, doing too much research into, demonology or something, but learning a little bit about some of how these beings operate can really help you be more empowered in your life.
Exactly. Like we say, just with, nutrition or keeping yourself healthy physically, pursue it the same way. You wouldn't want to be like, I wonder how sick I can get from the flu. Let me go try to, and catch it.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
That wouldn't be smart.
Right.
Well, would you like to share with everyone how they can keep up with your work and everything that's coming out? And just to give us some of your details, please.
Sure. Yeah. So my website for this work, for my psychic work, is healingpowers.net. That's healingpowers.net. And you can find me on Facebook. I have a public figure page. And then also I'm on Twitter at that Laura Powers. And if you want to see pictures from the magazine spread, because I think it's kind of fun, from the cover of Supernatural Survival Guide, you can go to my Instagram, which is Laura Powers 44.
Thank you so much. Well, it's been such a treasure having you today. And, well, for myself, if you would like to stay on top of when I do podcasts or when I'm doing the Charmed Radio podcast that I do on Blog Talk Radio, where I take readings live, you can follow me on Facebook or Twitter, and that handle is at Tricia Carr Charm, Tricia, and just Charm at the end, CarrCharm. Or you can find me on YouTube, and you can look up Charmed Life with Tricia Carr, and that's I guess that's about all of you. Just Tricia Carr, charm, all that kind of stuff, and you'll be able to find me one way or another. So thank you so much, Laura Powers, for sharing your work, The Supernatural Survival Guide, and for chatting with me today. And thank you, everyone who is listening and tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.